Welcome into Carp's Corner. Got a great show lined up for you today. Got a lot of NFL news, halfway point, a little bit past the NFL, 10 weeks into the college football season. So, very, very exciting with what we're seeing right there. And we've got some updated Heisman Trophy odds and some things that, I don't think anybody expected to see at this point in time. Where some of these teams in college football are going, where they're at, some of the teams that are disappointing, some that have maybe risen to the occasion, even after a slow start, and then some great stuff coming out of the NFL. And when I say great, I mean things that are probably not the most um, compelling stories if you're in those markets, but things that you got to understand about what's happening and what's going on there. So we'll start with the NFL. I want to start with the Browns and what happened with them up in New England. To start off, this was a Browns team that picked by many, including myself, win the AFC North, team that could challenge in the AFC and potentially be a Super Bowl contender. They looked at that at points in time this year. Then you had the Odell Beckham Jr. situation. They had a big win last week. All appeared to be right in the world. It looked like the offense was going to where it needed to be, and Baker seemed to kind of be falling into place with the type of quarterback you thought he could ultimately be. All of a sudden, the wheels fell off on Sunday. They go up to New England. They put together a fantastic drive to start the game. 5 minutes, go down there, get a 7-point lead. And literally, that was about the only great thing they did all day. From that point on, they struggled to move the football. They struggled to get stops. They couldn't run it. They couldn't throw it. Now, I understand Nick Chubb out. You know, that's going to happen. Kareem Hunt out. Conklin, the right tackle, he's out. That's going to impact their running game. There's a lot of different reasons on why the Cleveland Browns struggled. But the reality is they got outplayed and they got outcoached. First time I think you could say that in the Kevin Stefanski era. This was the only time I've watched a game where I thought they don't have any answers. And I'm not sure it looks like guys even want to find the answers at this point in time. Bill Belichick always takes his teams and they start a little slow. Sometimes they start rocky. He figures out exactly what he has. He continues to build. Everybody gets better. And by the midpoint of the season, you're getting to see a team that's starting to look like a finished product. And they begin to push hard, and then they only get better from there. But he sculpts the team as the season goes. And so they're always better in the second half than they are in the first half of the season. This is not the case, with the Browns and what we saw. They ran into a buzzsaw of a team that at the beginning of the year, people thought they wouldn't even make the playoffs. They don't have enough offensive firepower. Mac Jones is too young. He looks to be a surgeon. Their defense is stepping up. They're able to run the football. They have the tight ends. They have weapons, and they've really put themselves and positioned themselves in a nice spot, being able to move forward to make a playoff run. New England Patriots are making the playoffs. I even think they got a decent shot of winning the NFC East. I'm not completely sold that they can't catch Buffalo and that they might not actually beat Buffalo and finish, as a division winner again. That's how much respect I have, for Bill Belichick. But Cleveland, they're struggling mightily. I don't know what they're going to have to do the second half of the season here. They're 5-5, 5-2 under the last 7 games, probably get you in. Getting to 10 wins. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a struggle. They have injuries. They're going to have to try to overcome some of that. They've got some COVID stuff. I mean, all of those things happen. It happens to every NFL team every single year. And so, you know what? There's limited excuses for it. Another NFL game finishes in a peculiar way. And you thought there would never be a team go 0-17 until they expanded to 17 games. And even though it's the first year they expanded, it looked like the Detroit Lions may be headed down that path. They were competing with Jacksonville. Jags have a couple of wins. Detroit still looking to find theirs. Well, they didn't exactly find a win. They found a tie, which that affirms them the ability to not go 0-17. They go 0-16-1, but they won't be the first team in NFL history to go 0-17. But that's not what this story is about. This is something that drives me nuts. And as I just talked about Bill Belichick and how smart he is and the situational football that they play, Mike Tomlin's a heck of a coach. I believe he just passed Bill Cowher for the 20th most winning coach in NFL history. And he's not even 50 years old. He's done an unbelievable job this year with Pittsburgh. He steadied the ship. I like his mentality. I like the way he coaches. I think he's top notch. But can we talk about situational football? Number one, making sure before all else that we get a chance to kick a field goal at the end of a game and don't fumble it and let the opposition recover it so that we are going to potentially end in a tie. I don't care if it's going into an overtime situation. I don't care if it's in overtime. You can't turn the football over then. You have to work on those situational football drills to make sure everybody's locked in. New England does it all the time. Parcells used to do it all the time. I have a guess that Mike Tomlin's done it a lot. Got to hit it more. But the thing that's the most disappointing to me, yeah, Najee Harris, their elite young running back who's carrying that team. Hasn't had a lot of great blocking. They ask him to do a lot, and he's produced. But at the end of the game, he comes out there and then says, he didn't know that you could finish in a tie in the NFL. It pains me to hear that. I don't understand how you can be paid to play a game and not understand the rules. I know in college, I know in high school, it's a little bit different. The overtime rules are different. They're more complicated in the NFL. I get it. I get it. But to me, either Mike Tomlin didn't go over it or Najee Harris wasn't listening. But either way, you can't be surprised. Now you'll say that doesn't have an impact on the game. Maybe it didn't, but it'll have impact on other things down the road. It's situational awareness in football, understanding the rules and what can potentially happen. That is critical to being a good football team. And one of your better players, even though they're young, needs to understand that. Najee Harris, we laugh at it, we joke. Donovan McNabb did the same thing. Like, I don't understand. It pains me as a former player to think there's guys out there who don't understand that you can't end in a tie. And Mike Tomlin is too good of a coach to have players on his team not understand that as well. Carolina Panthers struggling mightily. Sam Darnold rather gets hurt. Maybe ultimately the best thing happened. He was struggling. They had some issues. He hurts his shoulder. They re-signed Cam Newton. He comes back in. Didn't think he'd play at all week one. Guy's got 2 carries, 2 touchdowns. They throw him in a short yardage, red zone opportunities, and he's getting in the end zone. They have a huge victory over the Cards. I mean, I'm so happy for Cam. He goes up to the press conferences. He might be dressed like, Johnny Depp, Captain Jack Sparrow. He's got 47 bracelets on. He's got all the flag, all the swear, or all the swag, all the flair, got all that stuff going. And you know what? He sits there and screams, "I'm back," when he scores a touchdown. He's getting a flag for that. Who cares? Who cares? It's good to see Cam back. He's one of the more endearing figures in the NFL. And I've run the whole spectrum on Cam Newton. When he came in the league, I respected him a lot. Thought he was changing, developing as a quarterback. He has a Super Bowl loss, a hoodie down, pouting. Then he starts getting better. Looks to be that guy. Injuries robbed him of part of his prime. Goes to New England. Doesn't work out there. They draft Mac Jones, the whole COVID thing and all that stuff, testing protocols. I'm happy he's getting another chance. He's going to get the start this week. Matt Rule said he's taking the reps with the ones. I hope he gets back there because I'm a Cam Newton fan. I think the NFL's better when Cam Newton's playing because he's an athlete, unlike many guys you ever see walking this earth. And he has a big personality. He's a fun-loving guy, and everybody who I've talked to who's played with him truly loves to play with the dude. But since we're talking about Carolina quarterbacks, let's flip back to one that was there very recently. Starting quarterback for the Denver Broncos, Teddy Bridgewater. I understand quarterbacks aren't paid to tackle. They're not paid to go in there and throw their body around, to go blow people up. But when you're in a one-score game, and we're talking about the Denver Broncos, Philadelphia Eagles, I know it was 30-13 at the end. When you're in a one-score game, Melvin Gordon's handed off the football. Coughs it up. It's not an interception. It's not on you, Teddy. I get it. Darius Slay grabs the ball. He ultimately runs back 83 yards. But if you go find the footage, there's an opportunity Teddy Bridgewater has to be able to tackle Darius Slay, dive at him, trip him up, make him stumble a little bit so someone else can grab him. Like I said, it's a one-score game. It's still in the balance. There's still an opportunity for the Denver Broncos to win this thing. And unfortunately, he kind of like leans into him, gets out of the way. His explanation was that he's trying to use the sideline and force him out of bounds. I understand that. But, dude, that was the worst effort of tackling I've ever seen in my life. And if I'm a player on that team and you're out there busting your butt and you're taking hits, I'm not saying Teddy Bridgewater isn't tough. I'm asking for a little bit more effort than that. Just dive into the guy's legs. Maybe he'll trip over your body, whatever it is. But we're fighting our tail off to go out here and get wins. And when a fumble happens, you can't just push your chips in the middle and say we're done. Get up from the table, toss your cards down. No, you got to go at least make a little bit of an effort when it's a one-score game and you're battling for your job. And Teddy Bridgewater, he's a veteran quarterback, but it's not like he was Tom Brady or Drew Brees at the end, guys that were old and feeble that you were kind of worried about them getting hit. I mean, Tom got blasted on Sunday by Washington. So worried he wasn't going to get up from some of those. Teddy's still a fairly young guy. Even though he's had some injuries, you need to have a better effort because it sets the tone for your team. Now on to college football. Got a bunch of big games. Georgia, Tennessee. I made some predictions there. Ohio State, Purdue, Michigan, Penn State, OU, Baylor, Notre Dame at Virginia, and then we've got the Texas Longhorns doing some craziness. But first of all, Georgia going to Tennessee, it's 41-17. I called for Tennessee to be able to crack 20. The Georgia Bulldogs proved me wrong. Their defense is really good, but Josh Heupel, I did think, was able to do some things with going up tempo, doing some things in the passing game, where if other coaches see this, whether it's a Nick Saban, whether it's a Ryan Day, who have elite athletes, who have more depth, who can match up with Georgia a little bit better up front, there might be a way to kind of take advantage of that secondary somewhat and be able to get into them, wear down that front, and be able to put it to them. Remember, it was only 24-10 and a half. Georgia pours it on late, but I do like the fact that Tennessee didn't seem scared. They came out. The turnovers end up getting you, and Georgia just wears you down because they're so big, they're so physical, and it's eventually they start running the ball. They'll hit some play action with Bennett. But I do think that, this Georgia team, as good as they are, if they run into a situation where they have to score with people, it's going to be a problem. Their defense, but you got to get through that Georgia front. You have to find a way to block it up, and you have to find a way to run the ball enough to keep them honest. It's really tough to run against that Georgia Bulldogs front seven. I understand that. But you've got to find a way to do it enough to keep them off balance and then run some tempo. You get them gassed. Tennessee did a little bit of that, but they just didn't have the horses to be able to push it over the top. And you understand that. So while they didn't get to 20, they did score more points on Georgia than any other team this year. But Georgia wins comfortably, and they cover the number. Tennessee had a shot to maybe get a backdoor cover on it. Couldn't do it late in the game. Georgia Bulldogs take care of business. They're still the number one team in the country, and they're going to be that until they lose, which may or may not even happen. Ohio State, Purdue, game that I thought was going to be close. And what do I know? I guess the people in the desert, they're wealthy for a reason. They picked this game sitting around 3 touchdowns. It moved a little, 19-20. It was somewhere sitting 20 and a half, wherever you were looking. And there were some opportunities there. But Ohio State starts so fast. It's 35-7 before, heck, you feel like you could even sit down. This Buckeye offense looked a lot like it had been, from weeks 3, 4 through about 8. The last couple of weeks they had struggled. Wasn't great. Nebraska, Penn State, playing some good defensive fronts, playing some good defenses. Purdue's defense isn't great, but they do have a very solid front. They've got some NFL caliber players, and I was curious to see if Ohio State would be able to run the ball. They have a better scoring defense statistically than the Buckeyes do. And so I wanted to see how they'd be able to do it. Ohio State hangs 59 on them. It felt like it could have been 80. They pulled it off. 361 with Stroud through the air, 263 on the ground. Mayan Williams is back, the meatball, pounding the football. Travion Henderson rips a long touchdown run. They have Garrett Wilson back in the fold after his concussion. 3 touchdowns, does a phenomenal job, and 1 rushing touchdown to throw in there as well. The running attack was better. I was happy to see that. And that goes in the fact that this offensive line played much better against Purdue than they had the last couple of weeks. That's big time ball for an offense that's been struggling. And struggling is a relative term, but struggling relative to expectations. They haven't necessarily met that mark. They did again on Saturday, did it in a huge way. And CJ Stroud, I've been someone that's given him grief for maybe not running the football when it's there. Played almost a flawless game. Threw the football really, really well. Didn't need to run it. There weren't opportunities to run it. The next 2 weeks, I'm trusting against Michigan State and Michigan when he has to run the football, CJ Stroud will make that decision. He'll tug it down. He doesn't need to get hit, but he'll tug it down, pull it, get what he needs to, get down or get out of bounds. Because now it's just all about winning with 2 weeks left in the season. But a great performance by Ohio State. A little bit of concern giving up 31 points, But against a team like Purdue, Jeff Brom is incredibly creative. I put him up there with Mike Leach, Lane Kiffin, some of these elite offensive play callers. And when you have a big lead like that, we're going to give you yards. We'll allow you to have some points as long as you don't score too quickly. We just got to make sure that you don't score them, in 2 minutes. And so the Ohio State defense did that, did a pretty good job, and they held David Bell to right around 100 yards. Didn't have a massive impact on the game. Michigan, Penn State, a game that almost went to the Nittany Lions. They were at home. You could feel the energy. They took Michigan's best shots. Sean Clifford was a warrior for Penn State. Not the greatest statistical day you're going to find, but he got battered around, sacked well over 5 times, kept popping up off the ground, and did what he had to do. And he gave his team the lead, 17-14, 2-point conversion to Dotson, and you're feeling good about that if you're Penn State. And then all of a sudden, his defense lets him down. And I give this to Cade McNamara, Michigan's quarterback, who had 3 touchdowns on the day. They were without Blake Corum, half of their Thunder and Lightning combo. They had to lean on Hassan Haskins. He had about $150 on the ground. But without his running mate, you could see how this offense lacks explosion. But a great job by Cade McNamara dropping back, hitting their tight end all on a crosser, turns that thing for about 40 yards, finds pay dirt. And it was unfortunately too much for Penn State to recover from. So Michigan with Jim Harbaugh, they're sitting in a good spot. I believe they have Maryland coming up this week. We'll talk about that later. But they're in a good spot from where they need to be moving forward. They've structured themselves to where they win this week. They'll be facing Ohio State for a chance to go to the Big Ten championship game in Indy, something they have never done since it's been instituted. I've never made it. Michigan State's been there a couple of times. Michigan has not made it. And it's unbelievable to think that that's the case when it's been going on for a decade. So good job for Michigan. Penn State put up a valiant effort. They're sitting at 6-4. James Franklin, Jimmy Sexton. We'll see if he ends up going to USC. I don't know if that tarnishes, if it's kind of left him a little bit, if he doesn't have the shine that he used to. But if USC wants him, I think that they'll have a chance to get him, even though Penn State has this phenomenal recruiting class coming up. Biggest upset of the day. OU Baylor. Game that was close early on. Baylor puts the pedal down. They pull away, and they're kicking a field goal late at the game, or at the end of the game. There's all kinds of rigmarole and nonsense going on. Texas leaving OU's leaving the field. Baylor, they're kicking an extra or field goal, and people are upset and they're wondering why. And you hear Dave Aranda in the press conference afterwards, and this was something that, frankly, I didn't realize, that when they play this round robin type of conference schedule and you just take the 2 best teams, it's not division winners. One of their tiebreakers is point differential. And so when you have that, I'm not saying you're going to go try to run up the score, but if you have a chance to kick a field goal and add 3 more at the end of the game, when you're in a battle, like OU's most likely getting into the Big 12 championship game. I would have to check scenarios, but they'd have to struggle and lose, probably all 3 of their remaining games down the stretch, at least 1 more. Whereas, you see Baylor, they're fighting. Iowa State was fighting, even though they took a bad loss. You got Okie State, depending on what happens with them, and Oklahoma. And so it's a battle. It's a battle right there. So I understand why Dave Aranda did it. But, we just said this coming in the game. OU's ranked 8th. Everybody's complaining about it. And frankly, I thought they probably should have been ranked a little higher. But we said, hey, they have Baylor coming up, they have Iowa State, and they have Bedlam with Okie State. If they all take care of business, they win all those games, and those teams don't fall apart, they'll be catapulted right up there to where they need to be, and they'll have a shot to make the playoff. Now, I think that shot has kind of disappeared. The Baylor Bears took it to them. And now if you're a Baylor fan, you got to be curious, wondering, like Dave Aranda, he was the D coordinator at LSU under Ed Orgeron. They're looking for a new coach. The rumor is that I've heard, I thought they wanted an offensive guy, but people are maybe locking in on Dave Aranda after that big win. He's turned this Baylor team around. Heck, they might be ranked in the top 10 or right on the fringe this week. I think he's probably the next head coach at LSU if he wants the job. I believe they'd probably offer to him. They're familiar with the guy. They've seen what he's done as a head coach now. And you'd have to ask yourself this, like, you're getting significantly more talent at LSU than you are at Baylor. Now, I know the expectations are higher and the teams you're playing consistently are better. That's all true, but you're going to have better players. So you think of what they'd be able to do with that. Other news, Notre Dame crushes Virginia. Notre Dame's sitting there. They're kind of a conundrum. I think they're the best of the non-elite teams, sitting right there probably, at the end of the season at 6 or 7. You'll beat it, another Power 5 team that maybe won their conference or finished second, but isn't playoff worthy, win that game, and that's what they are. They're really good this year. I don't think they can compete with Georgia, maybe Ohio State, possibly Oregon. Cincinnati already beat them. And you could argue Cincinnati's struggling right now. Notre Dame's playing a little bit better. And struggle's relative since he did their job on Friday night. It wasn't the prettiest thing in the world, but they did win comfortably and controlled the game. So there's that. But Notre Dame getting it done, and that's honestly helping Cincinnati. The interesting part will be is at the end of the year, will they try to find a way, if there's enough losses, and to get Notre Dame at 4 over Cincinnati if those are the two teams that are sitting there. That's what's going to be really interesting to watch. I don't think they can do it, but this committee has proven they can do whatever they want. And then lastly, with college football, my goodness, Robinson's out for the rest of the year at Texas. Bijan, done. He's going to be sitting out the rest of the season. I don't blame him. He's got an injury, and Sark has just underachieved this year. They looked good to start the season at Texas, but losing to Kansas, I mean, my goodness, I know Kansas gave OU a scare, but that's a tough one. That's really tough. You should have better players rolling out of bed and being able to beat Kansas with what is on the roster. I understand he doesn't have full recruiting classes and all that, but Tom Herman didn't leave the cupboard that bare. 57-56. And the one great story that comes out of it that I really liked is you've got, like the third or fourth team tight end / fullback. He's a walk-on, never even played offense in a game for Kansas before today. Jared Casey catches the game-winning 2-point conversion. I love the fact that they're going for this and going and trying to win it. This is a school that Tech is supposed to have Les Miles, their coach. That thing gets sideways, and they find a way to get a big signature win, something that these guys will always remember, and something that Texas fans will probably never forget. And those players on Texas will probably have that in their mind as a nightmare for quite some time. So the last couple pieces of college football now, we got the Heisman Watch. You think about this. DJ Uiagalelei, Spencer Rattler. They were sliding Caleb Williams into this thing for a little bit earlier this year. I think we still have Pickett sitting there at a chance to maybe make a run, but a lot of the guys that started the season, these big quarterbacks, like I think JT Daniels on that, he's not even starting anymore. These guys were up there in the selection set for being able to ultimately win the Heisman Trophy. Got a new odds-on favorite, someone who is currently starting. They didn't get benched. They were missing a game, but CJ Stroud, Ohio State's quarterback, FanDuel odds plus 125, followed by Bryce Young at plus 250. Kenneth Walker III, Michigan State's running back at 450. Matt Corral then at 750. Then you've got Pickett and Henderson, Travion Henderson, the running back for Ohio State, coming in at 4,000 and 5,000 apiece. So really, you've got a cluster at the top. You've got CJ, you've got Bryce, you've got Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker's going to have an opportunity this weekend against Ohio State to put on a show. CJ Stroud, who have the next couple weeks, I think, to put on a show. Bryce Young, he's going to have the Iron Bowl. He's going to have the SEC championship. I'm excited to see which one of these guys pulls away with it. I couldn't have fathomed CJ Stroud winning it. Getting there at the beginning of the season, I thought would have been incredibly impressive. But this is where college football is right now. There's a void of elite quarterbacks. I think a lot of it is due to COVID and the inability to develop guys. But some of these big time teams, the Georgias, the Bamas, Ohio States, Oklahomas, Clemson's, heck, you throw Texas, LSU, whatever you want. But a lot of them have struggled to replace. Their quarterbacks have been good. Bryce Young's been good. CJ Stroud's been good, but no one has separated themselves. And so this thing is still up for grabs right now. Maybe CJ Stroud pulls it away. Redshirt freshman. Be curious to see. The next couple games will define it. We'll have all this locked up in 3 weeks. I'm excited about it. My top 10, you've got Georgia, Bama, Ohio State. I think Oregon in the top 4. I think they jump with how Ohio State beat Purdue, a ranked team this week. I think that the committee has them jump Oregon in a head-to-head. I think they got Cincy at 5. You've got Michigan at 6, Michigan State at 7. Notre Dame sliding in there to 8. I think you're going to have Oklahoma State at 9, but I mean, the reality is Ole Miss had a big win against Texas A&M, and then Baylor had that big win against Texas. I could even see Baylor sliding in there to the 10 spot, even though Wake also had a big win over NC State. So all those teams are clustered there at the back end of the top 10. I don't know if any of those teams have a realistic shot right now based upon what's happening. They're going to need some help. I think Cincinnati will still need help with Oregon potentially losing. May have to play Utah twice. Potentially Bama loses to Georgia. Either one of those things happen. I think ultimately Cincy gets in as long as they look good and play well doing it. But it's going to be interesting to see if maybe a 2-loss team gets in this year. Do they let Cincy crash the party? Who knows what Gary Bart is going to come out and say? It'll all be craziness anyway. But that's this edition of Carp's Corner. Thanks for tuning in. Talk to you soon.